contributions. We couldn't get along without you. We are grateful for your energy, enthusiasm, and dedication that you bring to your roles as volunteers. You make our mission that much smoother. So thank you. Thank you for attending, and thank you to Samantha for organizing this wonderful event this year by Zoom. But as she said, next year, I know we're going to be able to do this in person. So I will go on to our door prizes. And as Samantha said, they have been pre-chosen. So the first one is a bouquet of flowers from Holland Park. And it goes to Sheila Rathwell, who is one of our information counselors. So congratulations, Sheila. And second is a gift card for $25 from Hop Urban Market, and it goes to Maria Dufour, D-U-F-O-U-R, who is a Meals on Wheels volunteer on Thursday. So congratulations to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. That was so well put. This really is the year of the volunteer. That's such great phrasing. I'm now going to pass it along to Derek Collins, who's the president of our board of directors.
Hi, everybody. There's really not a lot. I'm just sort of repeating what Samantha and Jane have said from the board perspective. So on behalf of the board, we certainly know that everybody has their own personal challenges since this pandemic began, and despite that, Jane and Pat and Samantha, Amy, Elska have all worked together. We're now over a year now through the lockdowns, and once again, on behalf, with your support, tremendous support, we've been able to deliver on all the services that DCS was doing, virtually all the services that DCS was doing prior to this. And if it wasn't for you folks, many folks wouldn't get their Meals on Wheels. They wouldn't get to their medical appointments. They wouldn't get their groceries. And now we're helping out with vaccinations, whether it's going to the appointments, helping out with actually booking an appointment. So on behalf of the board, we know that, and we thank you, and thanks for today, Samantha, and for putting this together. It's not something nice that we can do, despite the fact that we can't be together in the same hall having an afternoon tea or something of that nature. So once again, thanks again, and thanks for everybody, and enjoy the afternoon.
Thank you, Derek. So now we're going to pass it along to our main presentation, which is a tour of the Dundas Museum. We have Anna Patterson, who's the Education, Events, and Volunteer Coordinator there, and also Austin Strutt, and he's the Exhibitions Coordinator.
All right, hello. Just wanted to say hello and welcome to everyone, all the staff and volunteers at Dundas Community Services, and particularly Sam, miss you for sure. So my name is Austin Strutt, and I'm Exhibitions Coordinator here at the Dundas Museum. And here at the museum, we pride ourselves in preserving and retelling the history of our community of Dundas. And we're always working to expand our collection and find new stories, and obviously bring in new people from the community, not only to see what we have, but to share their stories too. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick little tour of the first part of our gallery. And then I've brought up some neat artifacts that I find really interesting out of our vault. We have a huge collection of artifacts from Dundas's history dating back to prehistoric times. So I'd love to show you guys some of that stuff. Right off the bat, I want to say if anybody has any questions, my camera woman Anna here is keeping an eye on the chat. So please just type out your questions into the chat, and she'll just wave me down, and I can do my best to answer them, just like if we were doing the tour in person. After I show the artifacts, we'll do a little, we have a bit of a trivia game. Don't worry, it's not necessarily stuff from the tour. We're not quizzing you, just some little questions about Dundas. And then we have a prize giveaway of our own for you guys. So thanks again for coming in. So to start off on this tour, I think I'll sort of begin with the early history of Dundas as a community. So of course that dates back to the earliest European settlers who came here to the area. And that settlement began right after the American Revolution. So the first settlers, European settlers in Dundas, were what were known as loyalists. They were American colonists from the United States who stayed loyal to the king during the American Revolution. Many of them found they could no longer stay in their homeland afterward and were given land up here in Canada. So this area in particular was settled by loyalists. The first loyalist to come here to Dundas and the first European to settle in Dundas was Anne Morden. She was a widow whose husband had been hung as a spy during the American Revolution. And she settled here in Dundas, owned what was essentially the north half of the whole valley. Her and her sons made a farm there and then slowly partitioned it off over time. One of my favorite artifacts is right here. It's a dowry chest, which is, of course, a chest that a young girl would have been given as a child that she would fill with all the clothes and needlework and quilts and objects that she inherited over her lifetime that she would take with her when she was married. This dowry chest belonged to the Lyons family, which has been a prominent family in Dundas. And you can see the date right on the front there, perhaps, is 1775, which is the year that the American Revolutionary War began. This chest was brought up from Pennsylvania by the Lyons family, who settled in Dundas in the 1790s. Now, people often talk about how, or I often hear them say that Dundas is actually older than Hamilton. Well, it's a little dubious because exactly when the first settlers arrived is up for grabs a bit. But what is interesting is Dundas was a powerhouse and an important community before Hamilton was, where Hamilton was very rural and spread out. Large properties of big landowners like Sir Allan MacNab, who owned Dundurn Castle. Dundas became an industrial and commercial center because it had so many creeks that they powered mills, and those mills were the early factories of their day. It meant that all the trees that got cut down in Dundas and Beverly and West Flamborough, they all got sent out to Dundas to be milled and turned into lumber. All the farmers from those areas too had to send all their goods to Dundas to get it milled and churned up and eventually shipped out of Dundas via the Desjardins Canal. The Desjardins Canal was opened in Dundas in 1837, and it was it was a man-made canal from the Lake Ontario, the head of the lake in Burlington Bay, into Dundas. So Dundas was actually a port city for a long part of its history. This model here recreates the turning basin of the canal, which was just north of Coots Drive, right where Centennial Park is today. They filled in the canal in 1967 during the Centennial celebrations, because of course by that time it had long stood empty. But 100 years earlier, back in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, it was the bustling center of town. And it fueled commerce for all kinds of really interesting industries like the ones up here. The Gartshore shops made huge factory machines and pumps for cities' water systems. Canada Screw Company made the first screws in Canada. There was an axe factory in Dundas for over 50 years. There was a cotton mill, which was now sort of right just kitty corner to where Town Hall is. It's now the Cotton Mill Estates. But really, you name it, they were making it in Dundas. It's fascinating. And of course, all of that commerce and industry meant that there were a lot of grocery stores and a lot of taverns and hotels to deal with the trade of the people coming into town. And a lot of the most notable buildings and recognizable ones in Dundas were the old taverns and hotels that serviced the farmers who came in and needed a place to stay while they were getting their goods shipped out, and also you needed a place to spend their money. That includes places like the Central and Melbourne hotels that are still standing, and the Collins, notably. Just a moment. Yeah, and the Collins Hotel, which of course is one of the most iconic buildings in town. So that's sort of the heyday and the golden age of Dundas was at that time period. And eventually, as ships became larger and they needed deeper ports, and as the railways came in and the canal became less important, Dundas began to shrink and shrink as a going concern of industry. They didn't really have the political influence anymore, and slowly became, eventually a subsidiary town to Hamilton. But of course, not in the hearts of Dundasians themselves, who still don't really think of the communities as absolutely connected. So with that sort of first early history laid out, I'd just like to show you guys some interesting artifacts that I find fascinating that come out of our collection. So I tried to pick something here that might appeal to everybody. The first item here is an axe, a giant broad axe. So I mentioned that Dundas had an axe works, an axe factory for over 50 years. This is one of the axes made in Dundas. It would have been made on a factory that no longer stands on Hat Street, which was known as the Hourigan Axe Factory and later the Dundas Axe Works. And though it's hard to see, the name of Dundas Axe Works is still present on this axe. What's interesting about this axe is it doesn't really look like a regular one. If you guys can see, I hope, only one side of the axe is beveled and the other one is flat. And the handle comes out at a strange sort of an angle, not straight with the blade. This is because this is a shingling axe, and it's made for a farmer to use to turn a round log into a flattened piece of lumber, or even split it up into square shingles. So having only one side beveled and the other side flat means that you can make really nice cuts that chip off very square pieces of the log. You would be able to cut off the bark and leave a very straight surface. And the angled handle means that as you walk along the log chopping, you would have some distance from it, and you wouldn't be swinging your axe right into, where your own leg would be. Now, another object here, if there are any artists listening in, Dundas has a long history of art and artists who captured not only the town and its people, but the landscape around it in particular. This is a really beautiful painting. It dates to about 1895 of Two's Falls by a fellow named T.H. Wilkinson. T.H. Wilkinson was one of the most prolific Dundas artists who painted all manner of waterfalls, scenes of Coote's Paradise, the creek. And in fact, he painted so much of the natural area around here that oftentimes his paintings kind of look like they could be from any time. Like this could have been done even today. The landscape has changed so little. T.H. Wilkinson was so prolific that his sketches and his paintings still kind of turn up in antique stores from time to time. So always keep an eye out if you're looking for a Dundas painting or looking to find something to donate to the museum and art collection. Now, this item here is an artillery shell from the First World War. It was produced in town at the Bertram's factory, which was located on Hat Street, and their subsidiary company, the Pratt & Whitney Small Tools Division, also made weapons production and ammunitions production, and that building still stands. It's the Dundas Valley School of Art, actually. But across the street on Hat Street, where Amica is today, was once the giant Bertram machine factory. They produced big machines for other factories, steam hammers, punches, giant lathes, which were even used in the steel factories in Stelco and in Hamilton. They were the last big industry to be operating in Dundas, well after the rest of the companies had sort of, big industrial companies had closed. In fact, they operated into the 1950s. And during both the First and Second World War, they converted entirely to war production, making guns, big guns for naval ships, as well as shells for artillery pieces. This one's just the casing, doesn't have any of the guns still in it. This object here is an antique railway lamp. So it's actually a lamp that would have been held by a railway conductor in the mid-1800s. It has a big crack in the front, and that's because the oral history that goes with this lamp says that it was involved in the Desjardins Canal disaster. I don't know how many of you have heard of that, but it's one of the more notable macabre incidents that happened in the area. It was in 1857, a train going across the railway tracks at the Burlington Heights, where the high-level bridge is now, sort of where Burlington Bay meets Coote's Paradise, crashed suddenly through the trestle that it was going across. a wheel came loose and cut through the timber, and it weakened the bridge. The whole bridge collapsed, and the train plunged into the icy, wintry waters below. The whole first engine locomotive and then the passenger car were entirely submerged underwater, and 59 people lost their lives, many of them women whose big billowing dresses would have just sucked them right down to the bottom when filled with water. So this was a huge tragedy that made headlines the world over, and was one of the things that spelled the end for the Desjardins Canal, because they replaced that wooden trestle, which could be lifted for ships to enter, with a solid bridge that the tall ships could no longer pass through. These two objects here are ice skates. And they're notable because they are the very first objects to ever be taken into the museum's collection. They date back to the 1860s, but they came into our collection in 1942, before there ever was a museum, when one of the member of the Bertram family, Mr. H. Graham Bertram, started to get interested in collecting artifacts. He started a Dundas Historical Society with a bunch of other interested people in town, and they went around to people's houses and asked what they had that was of local significance. These skates had belonged to Andrew Graham, who was a Dundas grocer for many years. And he had used these skates to skate on the frozen Desjardins Canal back in the 1860s. All of our objects have a little number on them. That's how we track them. So the number always references the year and then the item that came in, so what order it came in. So these are 1942-1, meaning that they came in 1942 and they were the very first item. Mr. Graham Bertram's collection sort of got bigger and bigger and bigger until by the early 50s he thought, geez, we could, create a museum to hold all this stuff. And in 1956, this museum was opened. The last item here that I brought out to show you guys is a bit of a bigger one, and it's a child's sled that, if you can see, has some hand-painted decoration on it. It says Santa Claus, and there's a little horse. So this sled belonged to two twin sisters, Mary and Helen Bain, and they would have played with it around 1875 circa. So the Bains were a really notable family in town. Their father was Thomas Bain, who was an MP for about 28 years and also served as the Speaker of the House of Commons in Ottawa in 1900. He lived in Dundas and retired to Dundas afterward, becoming the head of a banking and loan company. And the Bain sisters grew up to be very notable characters in town who collected a lot of artifacts and history and passed a lot of that on to the museum in their own right. This sled was found after their deaths later on in the carriage house of the Bain estate, which was called Bonington at 50 Governor's Road. So that's my my little presentation to everyone. If anybody has any questions about anything, please put them in now before I get on to our trivia. So as people type out the questions, I'll just introduce, we're gonna do a little trivia game. Just 7 questions. The person who gets them all right, or anybody who gets them all right, or the person who gets the most right, will be entered into a draw for a prize. And what we're giving away is, it's called a Dundas box, a Made in Dundas box, which is a bag of assorted items that come from different vendors in town. It's something that the museum has been doing to help local businesses and sponsor people to, bring their products out to a wider audience. So it's a variety of different items from local businesses. The Dundas boxes, they go for $100, but it's $171 of retail value of stuff inside. So we'll be giving out one of those to the winner. Oh, okay. Well, sure, yeah. Now, oftentimes when I'm talking about just the community of Dundas, I start with the loyalists because it always feels like I'm not doing justice to the indigenous history of the valley, which obviously stretches back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The very oldest artifact we have in the museum's collection that's human-made is this spear point, which is a Paleolithic spear point. Unfortunately, we don't know where exactly it was found in Dundas. It came in the 1970s in a box of children's trinkets. But the telltale sign that is local is that it's made of a specific type of flint, chert, that is Onondaga chert, that was excavated around here and in this area. It dates to about 8,000 BC, which is pretty fascinating. The next item below it is a pottery shard from the Princess Point culture. This is a culture that flourished around 500 AD and is named after the site of Princess Point, where some archaeological remains have been found, and that became sort of the typology point from which other similar discoveries are named. The biggest archaeological sort of record of indigenous people in Dundas, however, comes from a culture that we know as the neutral culture. This was a name that the French gave them because the French saw them as not participating in the wars between the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat. But the neutral people were actually a fascinating group that played a very important role in those wars as a sort of buffer zone between these two big confederacies. And it was their control of the flint quarries that made them a really powerful political concern in the area. Unfortunately, the only records that we have, written records, come from the French Jesuits, who were not the best and most sympathetic people to keep records of these people. And they were eventually lost their territory just before the time of the Loyalist colonization due to the spread of the Seneca and a couple of the other Six Nations tribes northward, and then their eventual retreat, whereas the Mississauga people came in after them. So it was the Mississauga people and not the neutral who left their, who did the, signed the treaties that pertain to this area. Dundas itself is part of a treaty called the Between the Lakes Treaty between the Mississauga and the British Crown. Oh, okay. So the museum has actually been renovated lots of times. I said 1956 was when we opened. We got some additional galleries and an enlarged vault in the 1980s. But if you're a Dundas person who remembers it, it probably looked largely the same from the 1950s up until 2013, when it was renovated and attached to the old Peary homestead, which was next door. So Mrs. Peary, who had lived next door in the 50s, she donated her orchard to be the land for the museum. But now the Peary house and the museum are actually connected via our atrium in 2013. And subsequently, the space inside has been renovated a few times.
And are there any artifacts that you're seeking?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, we are always looking for stuff. Our mandate is Dundas related. So really anything that's related to Dundas, we're interested in, particularly with a story. And it's the story that makes stuff the most important. Like often people think that we're looking for stuff that is valuable or necessarily rare, but we are actually just looking for everyday objects that have an important story and connection to people who lived in Dundas. So say your father was a barber and he used the same barber's tool for years and years and years in his store on King Street. Well, then that tool, however much it's worth or even old it is, becomes really precious to us because it has this story connected to it. That said, we are definitely interested in stuff in particularly from about the 1940s onward. A lot of people who donate things think of historical records as stuff that is over 100 years old. But because of that, we lose out on a lot of the interesting images and histories of stuff, even from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, which as time moves on, will increasingly become history. So one thing we're always interested in is photographs. If people have photographs of the area of their families in Dundas, even just from the last 40, 50 years, we would love to have a chance to even just scan them for our own collection, take write-ups about the people, interesting stories, and then hand them back. So there's always lots of chance to donate things.
I have a question. My ancestors are from Dundas, which would be the Lions and the Knowles. And I think, yeah, and I think I have I do have a second or third cousin who documented for many years, going way, way back, created a book. There's a lot of photos. I do have copies of the photos, but I don't know if he has passed it along to the museum. How would I know? You know, I don't see him very often. He does live in town.
Well, you could contact us through our website. Our archivist, Sandra, will definitely know whether we have a copy of that book.
Great.
But I can tell you, if we do not, then we would want it.
Okay.
Because that's the kind of stuff that we love. Local history, stuff prepared by people, photographs, images, and of course, the Lyons family, incredibly old family in the area with a long history. We would be totally interested in that.
Great. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, okay. The Pearies have also a very long history in Dundas. Like a lot of the notable early Dundas families, they were Scottish. They came over from Scotland in the I believe 20s or 30s. And there were several Peary families, all related to the early group, who lived in Dundas and had different businesses. I know that one Peary owned a grocery store, an early grocery store that's on the property where the music hall is today. But the Peary homestead that's part of the museum had been in that family's ownership since about the 1870s. And again, a tangled long family history, but they were happy to cooperate with the museum. They saw themselves as very much involved in history, and they donated a lot of early artifacts from their family as well. Some of the Pearys had some very interesting experiences. I know there was a fellow named Robinson Peary who actually survived the sinking of the Lusitania, and he was from Dundas and worked in Hamilton. Are there any last questions that anyone has before we move on to the trivia? I thank you so much for listening. I love getting questions. I'm sure you can tell I just love to ramble on. There's no end to the fascinating history of the area and the people around here. All right. So the first question in our trivia, well, I'll just say what we want you to do is just write out the answer that you believe is correct in the chat under your name if you want to play. And then at the end, Anna will go through and she'll tally up who did the best. So it's just 7 questions. The first question is, what year appears on the Welcome to Dundas sign? This is the sign that stands outside of town at on Coots Drive. So A, 1787, B, 1814, or C, 1847. And I'll have Anna put that in the chat. What year appears on the Welcome to Dundas sign? 1787, 1814, or 1847? Have you got that in there? Do I need to repeat? Should I? All right, I'll just repeat those dates again. 1787, 1814, and 1847. All right, the next question is, how many columns are there on the Collins? So on the Collins, now the Collins Brew House. How many columns are there on the Collins? 4, 6, or 2? How many columns are there on the Collins? 4, 6, or 2? All right. The next question is, which of these Dundas buildings is the oldest? The post office, the music hall, or the Carnegie Library? And we're talking about the post office building. It's no longer the actual post office, but the post office building, the old music hall, which is now has Domestique Coffee House in it, or the Carnegie Library. Which Dundas building is the oldest? The post office, the old music hall, or the old Carnegie Library, which is now the Carnegie Gallery? Now here's another one that's a little detail about King Street. So the stone head of what animal, a stone carving of what animal's head can be found on King Street? A pig, a unicorn, or a cow? Stone head of what animal can be found on King Street? A pig, a unicorn, or a cow? Now the next question here is about the Desjardins Canal. So the Desjardins Canal was opened in what year? 1790, 1837, or 1920? So at least you have a choice of centuries there. 1790, 1837, or 1920? The Desjardins Canal was opened in what year? 1790, 1837, or 1920? All right, I'll move on. So before it was called Dundas, what was the town originally known as the village of? So was it the village of Morden's Paradise, the village of Coote's Paradise, or the village of Bird's Paradise? Morden's Paradise, Coote's Paradise, or Bird's Paradise? Before it was called Dundas, what was the town originally known as? Morden's Paradise, Coote's Paradise, or Bird's Paradise? And the final question, it does ask a little bit about the tour. What was the first item in the museum's collection? An axe, a pair of ice skates, or an artillery shell? There was an axe, a pair of ice skates, or an artillery shell? Once everybody who wants to answer is answered, should I go through and say the answers, or? Sure thing. I'll just give everyone a moment to finish up, and then I'll go through them again and say the answer. If anyone does have any more questions, please feel free to add those in as well. All right, so what year appears on the Welcome to Dundas sign? That's 1787. So though this is the accepted year of the arrival of Anne Morden and her sons to the Dundas Valley, evidence suggests that the family didn't really settle probably until 1788 or 1789. 1787 there, though, is the year of their arrival. Interesting, though, that it does predate the actual age of Dundas, the incorporated town. How many columns are there on the columns? 4. So see how many people were paying attention as they walk up and down the street. 4 columns on the columns. It was originally known actually as the North American Hotel, and was built by an Irish immigrant named Bernard Collins in 1841. Which building is the oldest? The post office, the music hall, or the Carnegie Library? Well, actually, the Carnegie Library is the oldest. It was built in 1909. But this is a tricky question because they're all pretty close. The music hall was built in 1911, and the post office was built in 1913, right before the First World War. The stone head of what animal can be found on King Street? Well, that is a cow. It's above the door on the building, which now holds the Kitchen Witch, and was formerly the location of the Glen Campbell Dairy Store in town. And that's why they had a beautiful cow's head carved in stone and mounted up at the top of the building. The Desjardins Canal was opened in what year? Well, it was opened in 1837, a decade after the mysterious death of its namesake, Peter Desjardins. He died while out collecting money that was due on shares, and his death certificate reads, "Killed by an act of God." So before it was called Dundas, what was the town originally known as the village of? So it was originally known as the village of Cootes Paradise. The original 1801 survey of which was bordered by north, south, east, and west streets on the prospective side. So the original town was laid out closer to the west end, and it eventually developed more around the town center. What was the first item in the museum's collection? It was the ice skates, which I mentioned, that belonged to Andrew Graham, a local grocer who used them to skate on the frozen Desjardins Canal. So I think that concludes my tour. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. I hope at the least we've sparked your interest in coming and visiting us once we're open again. Thank you so much to everybody, and hope that you all are safe, and we'll all get a chance to see you again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So should I wait for us to find out the winner of your grand prize, or will we do that at the end?
Yeah, I think we'll have to do that at the end because Anna's just tallying them up. She'll send you a message. She'll send you an email.
Okay. So I'll send out a list of all the prize winners in an email after this, okay? All right, so for us, we have another prize, and it's a $25 gift card for the Keeping Room, and that was won by Linda Fortier, who's a Friendly Calling volunteer. Now, I just want to say thank you to the Dundas Museum for such a wonderful tour. That was fantastic, and I'm really glad we got to learn a bit more about the community. Thank you, Austin, and thank you, Anna. Okay, so now I'm going to pass this along to Pat Wintemute. She's the financial administrator here at the Dundas Museum.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm the finance administrator, and I'm going to announce a couple of the prizes. So the door prize for the Holland Park bouquet goes to Laura Munger. She's a transportation volunteer. A $25 gift card for the Thirsty Cactus goes to Alan Ellis, who's also a transportation volunteer. And a $25 gift card for Mrs. Greenaways for Sue Watson, who's our information counselor. Congratulations to everyone.
Okay, and next I'm going to pass it along to Amy.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Robb. I coordinate the Friendly Calling and Friendly Visiting programs as well as the assisted transportation. And I've got a number of prizes to announce as well. So we have a Holland Park bouquet, and the winner of that is Tim Dolberg, who I know has joined us today. So congrats, Timmy. Another prize that I have is a $25 gift card to Piconi's Fine Foods. And the winner of that one is Marilyn Rawls, who's a Meals on Wheels volunteer on Wednesdays. And the final prize that I'm giving out is a $25 gift card to Dolce & Camera. And the winner of that prize is Doug Foster, who's one of my transportation volunteers and does friendly calling as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
So congrats, Doug.
Thank you. I didn't
Oh,
expect
great.
anything.
Oh, well, you're welcome. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't even hear, I heard my name, but I didn't hear, what did I win?
Oh, I'm a Holland Park bouquet.
Ooh, that's nice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And everyone is a winner here today because everyone who has come will receive a $5 gift card to Starbucks. Since we couldn't give you a treat, hopefully you can go get one yourself.
Oh, thank you.
So you'll get that in the mail, okay? Well, that is everything for us today. So once
Elska.
again, oh, sorry, Elska is here. So Elska, she would like to give an introduction. She's our community support worker.
Hi, everybody. I just want to congratulate you and thank you for all your hard efforts on behalf of the people that we support in Dundas. And my job is meeting with some of the people that need some extra help. And so I hear about all the wonderful volunteers that come and help them and bring the food. And so we're very, very appreciative and very fortunate to have so many wonderful people. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Elska. I'm so sorry about missing you in the itinerary.
Oh, no, I saw the itinerary. I was on there.
Okay. Well, thank you for everyone who joined us today. And thank you for volunteering with us. It's with your dedication and your hard work that we are able to provide our services to the community of Dundas. Thank you.
Okay. You're
Okay, so
Thanks.
I will pass it along to the museum for their prize. Anna, are you ready?
Oh.
Or we'll email it at the end. I'll send an email with the prize. Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us today, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank
That was
you.
good.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.